What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. In just a moment, I'm going to be going over my grades for the offense this week, so we'll get there in just a moment. But before we do so, certainly had some news and notes from Monday that I want to get to first. Let's start by the Packers making a major announcement, signing linebacker Peter Kalambayi, who is a former Houston Texan 6th round pick. He's played about 40 plus games in his career, primarily on special teams. He is added to the practice squad for the Packers, and we'll see. You never know if all of a sudden a player like this is going to get added to the roster, if they can make an impact on special teams. Right now, this is probably just a late season flyer. However, I will say this, when you see the team add a player who has had, some extensive use on special teams, and your team is massively struggling on special teams, you take note of it maybe just a little bit more, that maybe this could be somebody that they do call up at some point to help on special teams in a game where maybe there's a situation where you're playing in the playoffs. You maybe don't like your special teams matchup. You want to maybe get an extra player who has some experience and can help you out. And maybe that could be a game day activation from the practice squad for the Packers in a key moment if they're facing a tough special teams opponent. So you never quite know. And again, anytime you see a signing like that at this point in the season and potentially being able to fix something that's been a struggle, again, you take a little extra note of it. But right now, I don't think we can make anything more of this than just a late season practice squad flyer. And we'll see if at any point it becomes anything more than that, right? And you never know, right? I know it wasn't a practice squad signing, but the Packers signing Tyler Davis off of I think it was the Jaguars practice squad, if I remember correctly, and bringing him on the active roster. You don't think anything of that, and has a really nice game last week. So you never know with Brian Gutekunst where he's going to find a player that could potentially contribute. As he says over and over, roster building is a 365-day-a-year process. They add a new player to the practice squad on Monday, and we will keep an eye on him moving forward. In other news, not necessarily Packers related, but it was announced that Chris Godwin tore his ACL. Now, again, I think if everyone had their way, right, we would, turn injuries off like we can in Madden for the NFL season and just let all of these teams play with all of their best players. That Ravens-Packers game last week would have been a heck of a lot more fun with Clark and Z and Lamar Jackson and so on and so forth. So we want all of these teams to have all their players, but it's still noteworthy that one of the top teams in the NFC, the team that beat the Packers a year ago in the NFC Championship, will be missing one of their top wide receivers for the remainder of the season. Now, they are going to bring back Antonio Brown. He is not going to get cut or suspended further or anything like that. Tampa Bay announced that on Monday as well. So they do have somebody that's going to be able to sort of replace some of those snaps coming up or coming back from suspension, if you will. It sounds like Mike Evans and Leonard Fournette were able to avoid any serious injury. So that is huge news for Tampa as well. But no way about it. Losing Chris Godwin for the remainder of the season is really tough for them. And it's devastating for Godwin, right? He's set to be a free agent next year, probably going to get massively paid. And now, you're going to miss the majority of next year, and you're still in your prime. It's just it's devastating for the player. That's most disappointing. And then of course for Tampa Bay, a major loss for their roster moving forward as well. Speaking of wide receivers, it was announced that Davante Adams finished first in Pro Bowl voting from a fan's point of view. Remember, there's coaches, players, and fans that will vote on the Pro Bowl. I think it's coaches. Maybe it's media. I don't know. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But either way, Davante Adams, number one in receivers for fan voting. So cool. Just kind of, I don't know if it's like a reward or award or whatever for him, but he deserves it. He's wide receiver one. And it's always fun when, the fans sort of get that right and recognize, greatness. And that's what Davante is and what he deserves. So great on the fans for getting that one right and voting Davante as the top wide receiver in football. Other news and notes, we saw the Vikings beat the Bears. Nothing too major to take away from that other than the Vikings keep alive their playoff hopes. The Bears are officially eliminated, and it was a absolutely ugly game that, frankly, I hope you didn't have to watch because it was as ugly as football gets. Kirk Cousins throwing an interception with no Viking anywhere near it, and just a nightmare of a game. And the Matt Nagy era is coming to a close very quickly. And as a Packer fan, I think you probably have to be a little sad about that. But it is what it is, and hopefully the Bears can find a suitable replacement for Packer fans in whoever takes over next. But we will see where that goes as well. In the other Monday night game, the Cleveland Browns lost on a last-second field goal to the Raiders. I posed the question on Twitter, what would you rather have for the team that you're facing next week? Would you rather have them come off a win? Would you rather have them come off a loss? Or does it just not matter? And most people said it didn't matter. I think it was then they would prefer a loss and then a win, or I don't know, other way around. Either way, the point being here is I think it's always interesting, the psychology, right? Because as somebody pointed out, right, they get a win and maybe they build momentum. They get a loss and maybe they try harder to not get the second loss in a row. So you never quite know what the psychology is there. I will say this, though. I think there's two things you can always keep an eye on. One, if it was like an overtime game where they played a ton of snaps, where it's like they played 90 snaps on defense or something, I think that can always be a really big impact going into the next week. Of course, if they played like all the way on the West Coast and now on a short week have to come back, like those sort of things can matter. But I do think heartbreaking losses can have some level of a hangover effect as well. And I don't know that I would necessarily describe this as just like a dagger to the heartbreaking loss sort of thing. But with the Browns being completely ravaged by COVID and their top two quarterbacks are out, their coach is out, and I think it's, I don't know whether it's 15, 20 players, like they're just completely devastated by injuries and COVID right now. To get to that point where they fought all the way back and Nick Mullins leads them to potential victory and they have the lead late in the game, just to have your heart crushed with a late field goal, which really hurts your playoff hopes, I think that is a little bit of a heartbreak. And it's going to be interesting to see the type of hangover that Cleveland has from that game after really giving it their all to hang in there and almost beat the Raiders just to lose on a last-second field goal. That has to sting, and we'll see if Cleveland has any hangover from that next week or even on a short week on Saturday on Christmas Day at Lambeau Field. Of course, Browns-Packers. We'll see. It's so hard to even think or put that game into context right now because we just don't even know what those teams are going to look like. What are the returns from injury for Green Bay? And then from Cleveland's standpoint, do you get any guys back? Is there more of a COVID outbreak? Do you lose more guys? It's just so tough to even think about. So we'll do that later in the week. Instead, let's kind of go over this last week's game against the Ravens. Finished up my offensive grades. Let's start with our top three per usual. My number one, and again, as I've gone over this, and you guys probably know by now and are probably sick of me telling you, the quarterback position has the biggest opportunity for high grades or low grades, right? So Aaron Rodgers finished number one on my grades this week. It wasn't one of his just like immaculate games. He graded definitely in the positive and certainly still finished first overall. But the missed throws, the one to Devontae early in the game, and then the one to Allen Lazard definitely brought his grade back down to earth just a little bit. Still number one overall. I still think he was the number one reason for Green Bay's success in this game. I don't think you can. I mean, you can certainly make an argument that others maybe played better or whatever, but listen, Aaron Rodgers is still the MVP of that game and the player that matters most without question. And then, of course, you have those ridiculous throws to MVS, the one over the middle, the touchdown. So he had his fair share of epic moments. His play action fakes on those rollouts to Mercedes Lewis, just his command and composure when they're down and losing in the first half. Again, it was another really impressive game from Rodgers, and he's been on an absolute tear. Like I said, while it wasn't his best performance in this stretch of amazing play, it was still really good and still certainly worthy of being number one on the list. Number two on the list might surprise you a little bit. It's a name that you're certainly very familiar with being on the top of these lists, but maybe not his ultimate game this week, but it was Davante Adams once again. And the more I watched it, the more I love this game from Davante. So first of all, he's getting double teamed so often, and they're doing everything in their power to take him away, and he's still finding ways to be impactful. And, I was actually asked the question on the radio on Monday of can other teams take this blueprint of what the Ravens did against Davante Adams and use it against Green Bay? And my response was, you know what? Yeah, and you look at the stat sheet, it's 50 yards and a touchdown for Davante, and you're like, all right, that could work. However, you put it into context and you take away the throw where he lost 6 yards on the little swing pass, and you complete the pass early in the game where Davante was wide open and Rodgers just missed him. he's looking at probably 6 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown, even while devoting 2 defenders to him for a huge chunk of that game. That's not sustainable. Like, if he's going to beat you anyway, you're probably better off not putting 2 defenders on him. So I think there's some things that teams will maybe try to copycat from what Baltimore did with Adams, but Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur are just way too smart. If you're going to consistently double team Davante Adams, they're going to find ways to beat you in a variety of different forms. And I think we saw a little bit of that, and I think MVS stepped up big. I think they're going to have more success running the football if you do that. We didn't see that, but I think if you get Myers and Bakhtiari back, that could be a huge way that they're able to potentially run block a little bit better. I just don't see that as a sustainable outcome. Again, especially when, Adams should have had a 6-catch, 90-yard, 1-touchdown game despite all the attention that he got. There were other plays where Adams had the opportunity to get the ball too, and Rodgers just, didn't see him. Certainly nothing that Rodgers did wrong, just was looking in a different area of the field. Again, just another tremendous performance, and it makes you realize just how talented he is, that even when you put the time, effort, energy, and resources into stopping him, he still finds ways to beat you, and it could have even been better with just a couple small tweaks there, just looking his way or hitting him on the deep ball early in the game. And then my third highest graded player was MVS. It was back and forth between him and Big Dog, who deserves a shout out for his performance as well. MVS just barely eked him out, but you've got the deep ball that's underthrown down the field, the catch over the middle from the ridiculous throw from Rodgers. You had the touchdown catch. I think he converted another big first down over the middle of the field. Just a really nice performance by MVS. I thought he separated well. I thought he ran fast per usual. They used him as a decoy at times as well, which again goes unnoticed more often than not, but really nice game for MVS, and nice game from Lazard against Chicago. You had a nice game from MVS against the Ravens. Don't put it by Aaron Rodgers to almost have done that on purpose as we get closer to the playoffs, and knowing that teams are going to really take away Adams at all possible junctures, especially in key moments. Knowing that he can go to Lazard and MVS and that they can respond, I think is a huge boost probably to their confidence, and hopefully we'll get both of those players going for the remainder of the season. And with Randall Cobb out right now, that certainly is going to matter as well. Again, honorable mention to Big Dog for his blocking and catching and run after the catch. Just what a fun player to watch in so many different ways. I know he's not like this explosive playmaker in the open field, but his ability to break tackles and rumble down the field and block and pass block and run block and just all of it, he's a joy to watch. As Mike Wall and I have talked about, and I've mentioned on numerous occasions, there are very few players I enjoy watching on tape as much as I enjoy watching Mercedes Lewis, and just another great example of that this week. All right, bottom 3 players is all the right side of the offensive line. Lucas Patrick at center, Dennis Kelly at right tackle, Royce Newman at right guard. None egregious, none like awful grades by any stretch of the imagination. And really the offensive line struggle in this game was much more run block oriented than pass block oriented. And I think we view the offensive line in the context of how Rodgers is getting pressure. And we saw a couple sacks on Rodgers, a couple key moments where there was pressures. Royce Newman had one late in the game. Dennis Kelly had one earlier in the game. So there were certainly some moments where I think the offensive line from a pass pro standpoint would have liked to have back, but I didn't view this as a terrible game from a pass pro standpoint, but when you look at the opportunities from a run blocking standpoint, Lucas Patrick really struggled to move, Justin Ellis and Metabuike and Brandon Williams and those guys up front. Same thing with Royce Newman, same thing with Dennis Kelly on the edges. You just didn't see much movement, much consistency. And again, I know we're playing with second team offensive line for the most part here, and I'm not expecting the world. And I think overall, again, Stenavich and this line deserve a ton of credit. But you're not grading on a curve, right? I'm not saying like, well, it's a second team O-line, so I'm going to give them all a pass. And I thought Royce Newman did some really nice things in this game per usual, but there were a couple things here and there that you just wish he had back. It's a couple key plays and key moments. Again, late in the game, allowed a really big pressure that resulted in a sack. So those things all get taken into account. And again, I think overall, if you are grading the O-line on a curve, you're very pleased with how this O-line played. And again, that's why Stenavich and I think all 5 of these guys continue to deserve credit, but there's still some issues there. And I think run blocking was the key one in this game, which is one of the key reasons these 3 players particularly graded in the negative. I think John Running Jr. and Yosh Nijman both had very slight positives or neutral grades right in that realm as well. So Not terrible, not awful by any stretch of the imagination, but I think, ideally you would see those three start to run block a little bit better, and that could be very important as the season, grows to a close and they start prepping for the playoffs. So we'll see if that can be something that they can bounce back with a little bit this upcoming week against Cleveland. And we saw some injuries in COVID. Jadeveon Clowney went on the COVID list. Myles Garrett got a little bit banged up in that game. So we'll see just what Cleveland's able to bring to the table against those Packers offensive linemen. That's going to do it for me today. Just to recap really quick: Rodgers, Adams, MVS, my top three; Patrick, Kelly, Newman, my bottom three. Appreciate you as always. I will see you here tomorrow with Rachel Hotmeyer and Bailey Burmaster, who will be breaking down the Browns from us. If you don't remember, Bailey covered the Packers in Green Bay, moved to Cleveland this past offseason or the last one. I forget which one it was. Either way, she's been covering the Browns now, I think, for a couple of years. She does a tremendous job. So super excited to have her on tomorrow. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll be right back here tomorrow with those two amazing people. And we'll start breaking down this Packers-Browns game. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow. Go Pack Go.